If you want to be a true cult fan, then this is the video for you.
Clowns. Send in the clowns.
Today, we begin our ranking of black metal albums from 2024, and I'm totally sure no overly sensitive dweebs are going to get upset about it. But let's kick things off with Borknagar with Fall. This Norwegian progressive black metal band back for their 12th album since forming during the second wave all the way back in the 90s. This may have some of Vortex's best performances of all time in an already impressive career, I would say. Really stunning production too, once more really capturing the chill air and every impact of the drums. Top 3 for them if you ask me. Check out the discography tier list for more thoughts. It is going to perfection. Next up we have Funeral Winds with 333. The return of this black metal band also formed in the early 90s after dropping Stigmata Mali just last year. Pretty standard, culty black metal, both written and produced as if that era never ended. I commend the project for perfectly nailing that sound in the 2020s, but I'm just not one that's all about just recycling old tradition. There are other albums on this list that I think do that better, so this one went to okay. Next up is Nocturnal Sorcery with Captive in the Breath of Life. This Finnish black metal band formed in 2011, but took 11 years to release their debut full-length in 2022, and this is another case where, from the composition to the production, someone could have easily fooled me into believing this was, in fact, from the early era, but it's just executed so well. It's dark, raw, and cavernous, like a diabolical energy emerging from the depths. It landed at amazing. Love that cover art, too. Next up is Inquisition with Veneration of Medieval Mysticism and Cosmological Violence. This 9th record continues to surprise me with at times a more laid-back blackgazy aesthetic alongside Dagon's usual sermonizing croaks. It kind of feels like they took obscene verses for the multiverse but scaled back the satanic aggression in favor of a little bit more Drudka and Burtsum. It's a pretty strange and often dreamlike juxtaposition, and while it doesn't always work, I still find myself fairly engrossed in it. I'm putting it at a great tier. Then we have Dead Earth with Et Disperdam Illud. This is the new solo project of Mathia Camijo of 90s Swedish black metal band Algaon. The album is very atmospherically focused as opposed to feeling particularly riff-driven. Lots of plodding, doomy guitars and frosty, twinkling synths. The main words that come to mind are mournful and miserable, with only the occasional glimmers of light. If that appeals to you, you're gonna love it. Personally, I found it to be a little bit on the dull side, so I put it at okay. Next up is Malist with Of Scorched Earth. The 5th LP from this atmospheric, riff-driven one-man black metal black metal project from Moscow, Russia. This is icy traditionalism mixed with more modern black gaze sounds, loaded with melodic tremolo lines that honestly gave me a chill just listening. Compositions are on the longer side, but do a good job of changing things up, shifting tone, and bringing acoustic guitars to keep things interesting. I put this one at good. And we have Necrowretch with Swords of Dajjal. Now, I could see an argument for this belonging in the death metal tier list given their history over the last 15 years, but I'd argue that from the wretched vocals to the more ominous guitar melodies and twisted tremolo lines, this album fits way more on the black metal end of the spectrum. It's way more dissection than Morbid Angel. Really strong performances and production, but the songwriting struck me as pretty forgettable in terms of like retreading already overly trodden ideas. So I know a lot of people seem to love this one. I thought it was kind of middle of the road, so I put it at great tier. We got Hauntologist with Hollow. Made up of the busy dark side of Magua and the fall of Owl's Woods Graves, this album is several years in the making. Great dark atmosphere mixing heavy black metal elements with some post-metal tones as well. Very dynamic listen with plenty of ups and downs, maybe a little long-winded and at times meandering for my taste, but when it hits on tracks like Death Dreamer, it hits hard. I can see why a lot of people recommended this album to me. I put it at amazing. Then we have Hoplite, or I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the album name. But this is album number 4 for this one-man Chinese black metal crew, already excited to get more Asian countries in the mix as they often bring something completely different to the game. I don't know what I was expecting, but this shares an unpredictability that I love so much about bands like Psy. Maybe chaotic to a fault at times, but wholly original and unlike anything else on this particular list. I kind of toyed with fantastic or perfection, but I think ultimately I am going to put it at perfection. Then we have Vemod with The Deepening. The second LP from this Norwegian atmospheric black metal band formed in 1999 by a then just 12-year-old Jan Even. Recommended to fans of Luster, Alcest, Ultra Plagues, Panopticon, and Agalok. There are certain bands that are able to work that style for me, but this one tests my patience at times with all the repetition. Bigger fans of this subgenre in my audience seem to love it though. I ended up putting it at good. Next up is Volcandra with The Way of Ancients. The second album from this Kentucky-based project that fuses a number of styles, but I'd say swings most heavily into black metal with their icy atmosphere. Expect a mix of black and death metal vocals alongside a lot of melodic riffing and harmonizing for a pretty epic and sometimes folky energy, and I feel like it's becoming a meme for me to bring up Dissection at this point, but it's just not my fault that so many bands happen to be inspired by their sound in one way or another. Not my favorite album on this list by any means, but a really rock-solid one. I put it at great. Next up we have Ad Mortem with In Honorem Mortis. The debut from this German black metal band packed with energetic beats and cascading waterfalls of mournful melodic guitar tremolos. Once more, this is nothing I haven't heard 1,000 times before, but the execution is mostly spot on and songs definitely carry me and, in a strange way, even lift my spirits. Tracks can linger on in repetition a few minutes too long at times, but overall this is a strong recommendation to traditionalist black metal fans. Put it at amazing. Then we have Profane Burial with My Plateu. This Norwegian symphonic black metal band sounds like what you get if you combined Karish Angren's orchestrations and Grutel's vocals from Enslaved with the more dissonant guitar sounds of Krallis. Lots of great moments, but as a start-to-finish listen, I found myself frequently having bouts of boredom in between, largely due to the kind of directionless-sounding guitars. Definitely there's potential here, but I just put it at okay. Then we have Hulder with Verses in Oath. Now, I'm still not really understanding what the sudden hype around this album was back in February, but it seemed like out of nowhere I saw everyone talking about it in the week up to release. And yeah, it's fine. Like, solid atmosphere with spooky synths and capturing that second wave essence from the vocals to the production. Kind of a case where I actually think I might have enjoyed it more if I hadn't gone in with such high expectations from all that hype, but ended up putting it at a great tier. Then we have Loom with Of Sinful Nature. Album 2 from this international black metal crew, and I am loving the atmosphere. 5 relatively lengthy but deeply rewarding tracks to leave you drifting into the void in a similar vein as Ascension, Bluedas Nord, and Deathspell Omega. Haunting stuff that's great to put on and give in to its dark vibes. I put it at fantastic. Then we have Midnight with Hellish Expectations. Now, this is the album I've been wanting this Cleveland blackened speed metal band to make since the very beginning. In my opinion, their strength has always been that Venom-esque, straight-for-the-throat energy, and this is that shaved down to the bone. 10 tracks, all under 3 minutes, and for a seriously lean runtime of 26 minutes, and not a second of it is wasted on anything less than full speed ahead, motorcycle exhaust, and blasphemy, putting it at perfection. Next up is Devastation with Rise of the Dead. The third full-length album from this Belgian blackened thrash and speed metal band, emphasis on the black metal. There's no denying the influences of the likes of Venom and Motorhead on some of these riffs, but generally this has me thinking way more about, again, Dissection, and also Dimmu Borgir's heavier moments. Regardless, this is a ripper of a record full of jangly, arthritis-inducing, tremolo-picking, imposing vocals, and rollicking D-beats, landing them at fantastic. Next up is Dark Space with Dark Space 2. Despite this Swiss atmospheric black metal band kicking around since 1999 with plenty of hype from my fellow reviewers, I've just never really been fully able to get into them. There's an emphasis on slowly building ambience that, while well crafted, leaves me feeling antsy for something to happen. I feel like Bluthaus Nord are just superior when it comes to melding similar elements from black metal to industrial into something that feels just more engagingly paced for, again, me personally. But I ended up putting it at good, too. Then we have Alchemia with Abraxas. This French black metal band came recommended for fans of Magua, Groza, and Naglfar, and thematically combines the allegory of the two wolves and George Orwell's 1984. Musically, I don't find it particularly interesting, pretty dime a dozen black metal with generic tremolo melodies and not a whole lot else. Those newer to the genre may enjoy it, but I'm just not sure what longtime listeners will find here that they haven't heard again a billion times before, so this one went to okay. Then we have Darkestra with Nomad. This is the 7th album from this epic shamanic black metal crew, and with its incorporation of flute, jaw harp, and strings, I'd most closely compare their sound to Moon Sorrow mixed with a bit of Heilung. The atmosphere is massive and all-encompassing, though I do find myself wishing the guitars were a bit more interesting and the compositions a little bit more varied, but it's still got them a spot at amazing. We have Rotting Christ with Pro Christoi. The Greeks back after 5 years away with their 14th album, and definitely coming in a similar vein as the Heretics. Lots of emphasis on atmosphere that especially wowed me in the second half, though I do find the first to be a little bit more kind of rinse and repeat. Sorcery may actually be the best closer of their career. I put this one at... Wow, I actually just realized I fucked this up a little bit. I forgot that I had gotten rid of OK tier, so bear with me. Yeah, we had a killer tier, so... Hold your horses. There we go. It is Rotting Christ is going to killer tier. Nobody saw that, ever. Next up, we have ACOD with Versets Noir. I've enjoyed the previous albums from this French band. This now their 6th since forming in the 2000s. Initially, I was pretty sucked in by the usual atmosphere, especially with the additional symphonic backing elements, but unfortunately, as the opening 20-plus minute track progresses into maybe the final third, already I started to feel it drag. So yeah, I got a little bit bored after a while. It's going to okay. Next up is Mutilation with Black Metal Cult. The 7th album from this French band that has been putting out material for 30 years at this point points for arguably the most gnarly vocals on this list and a spiraling vortex of noisy guitars and drums, seemingly focused on being as loud and off-putting as possible. On the flip side, songs drag on way too long once more. Shorter would serve them a lot better. Once your ears adjust to it, just starts to get kind of tedious after a while. It didn't quite land at the bottom, though. I put it at good. Then we have Granitada with Der Wald zwischen den Welten. Translating from German to The Force Between Worlds, this debut album takes us on a very dreamlike drift to another plane. It feels like it sits right at the border of traditional atmospheric black metal with more modern post-black and black gaze sensibilities. With elements of both Inquisition's last album as well as things like Oathbreaker and Harakiri for the Sky, one of the prettier albums on this list without losing track of tradition and grimness. So I'm putting this one at amazing. And then we're closing out part 1 with Ishan with Ishan. The multi-talented man behind Emperor comes full circle here, with this being the most symphonically focused album he's probably ever done. We're talking full orchestra and even an alternate orchestra-only version alongside his eclectic melding of black metal and progressive music. Easily one of his most ambitious and massive-sounding records to date, and my second favorite of his solo works, just behind Arctis. This one is going to perfection. Blaze of Perdition with Abharsen. The much-awaited return of these Polish black metalers with their 6th album and now 20 years under their belt. Great mix of something earworm amidst the malevolent groove, infectious backing vocals too. Maybe uneven and slightly underwhelming considering the long wait, but it still stood out enough for me to put it at killer. Next up we have Dodsrit with Nocturnal Will. The fourth album from this Swedish melodic black metal band with soaring harmonized guitars, I would compare it to the likes of Uada and Magua. I had a number of people raving about this album in my comments, and it's pretty well deserved. This is the type of music that really carries you away to another plane, and as much as I love some good old-fashioned black metal misery, sometimes it's nice to listen to something that takes you in a more blissful and meditative direction, and with a little crust for good measure. So I'm going to put this one at fantastic. Next up is Dödsförd with Wrath. Wrath is the 12th album from this extremely prolific Greek band formed in 2001, sometimes even releasing multiple albums in a single year. Sadly, this is another one that ends up feeling a little bit assembly line for me. I can enjoy this same jangly tremolo melody only for so long before I start to get bored. Nice atmosphere, and the vocals are also sufficiently menacing, but I doubt I'll remember a single moment from this album, aside from maybe Raging Lust of Creation and Heaven Drops with Human Filth. Those are kind of standouts. I'm going to put this one at good tier. Then we have Dawes with Uranium. The fifth album from this German band since their debut in 2016, emphasis on slower pace and atmosphere, going maybe even 50-50 on the harsh vocals to the folky cleans. I'll admit I was pretty bored with the first track, but starting at Rodenquell 1666, things get pretty stunning with these soaring tremolo melodies and at times celebratory sounding singing. Another more uplifting one on this list, despite being about uranium mining, which is not very uplifting, but I'm going to put this one at great tier. Then we have Nightside with Death from the North. Despite forming all the way back in 1996, Death from the North is only this Finnish band's second full-length album. The tremolo lines here, along with the more symphonic elements, give me some early Emperor vibes, and the reverb-heavy production really makes the album sound pretty massive. The songwriting can feel a bit overly familiar, but the execution is very strong, even at the point of feeling like this could be a lost 90s album. I'm going to put this one at amazing, which means I'm going to have to start scooching this over just a little bit here. Next up is Folterkammer with Weibermacht. The second album from this German-speaking band out of New York. I definitely appreciate that this is at least one of the more unique-sounding albums in the genre this year, with the emphasis on female operatic vocals. But that ends up being a bit of a double-edged sword, as I also find them to become kind of tiresome and annoying at times. Andromeda also has some deliciously evil-sounding harsh vocals, and I feel like more of a balance with this would have been nice. I know a lot of people were really raving about this one. I thought it was decent. I'm going to put it at killer. We have Dark Throne with It Beckons Us All. A little dubious including this, as it wasn't exactly the return to their black metal roots that people were predicting, with still much more emphasis on doom, speed metal, and general 80s influences. Chris, who writes our written reviews at metaltrenches.com, is much more of a fan of their later albums. I greatly prefer their 90s output, though I did enjoy Eternal Hails. Frankly, I think they have just been putting out too much stuff too quickly, with 4 albums in the last 5 years alone. Quantity over quality. Nothing on this album really gripped or stuck with me. I was just kind of bored, so unfortunately, as much as I love Fenris & Co., this is going to okay. Then we have Wormwood with The Star. Album 4 from this Swedish melodic black metal band formed in 2014. I dig the overall production and sparkly synths, tons of atmosphere, and many different varieties. On the flip side, it slogs along at a pretty doomy pace that starts to make me sleepy and a little bored. Again, I'm just not a big doom guy. If you are, you'll probably enjoy this more than I did, but as it stands, I'm putting it at good. Then we have Gendod with Livskrampa. Album 4 from this Norwegian band formed in 2015. Kind of interesting at times, seeing a mix of styles from the folk-tinged melodic side to more chaotic and dissonant stuff. It can get a little bogged down under its own weight at times and meander. A little more focus would be nice, but overall this was a fairly unique and enjoyable listen that I put at great tier. Next up is Al-Namrood with Al-Akrab. the 10th album from this Saudi Arabian black metal crew, and I really enjoy their unique Middle Eastern twist on the genre with pounding hand drums as well as oud, ney, and kanun. So much atmosphere that feels as if I'm being transported directly to stunning desert landscapes and cities far more ancient than any I have ever lived in. Maybe a little repetitive, but definitely unique. I'm going to put it at killer. Next up is Hellbutcher with Hellbutcher. Following the disbanding of 90s black metal band Niflheim in 2022, frontman Hellbutcher started this new project, once more leaning on an old school sentiment with plenty of thrash and speed metal influence. Fans of Venom and early Bathory in particular should enjoy the jangly bass lines and emphasis on speed, but perhaps also fans of more modern takes like Midnight. Simple, but very effective and devilishly fun. I put it at amazing. Little slidey slide. Next up is Selbst with Despondency chord progressions. The third album from this Venezuelan band, whose drifty post-metal influence sound should appeal to fans of groups like Garea and Mgwa. The entire album conjures imagery of gray smoke wafting around a black void. Some pretty epic harmonized leads, too, that you wouldn't necessarily expect from the genre. I enjoyed this a lot. I'm going to put it at fantastic. Next up is Austere with Beneath the Threshold. The fourth album from this Australian depressive black metal band. In many ways, I'd frankly compare their sound more to the likes of Catatonia. And unfortunately, as a result, I have some of the same personal issues with this as I do with Catatonia. It's just great mournful atmosphere, but a little slow and doomy for my taste. I can see why people who enjoy this style might have enjoyed it more again, though I'd argue that this actually feels kind of out of place on this list, but I'm going to put it at good tier. Then we have Sedan with Visual Kill, The Becoming of Psychotic Depravity. The third album from this Nashville band centered around Japanese horror and other themes with both incredible atmosphere and one of my favorite cover arts of the year. This was highly requested when I asked the audience what their favorite black metal album of the year so far was towards the end of June, and the reasoning is obvious to me. Just stunning, haunting cascades of tremolo melodies and some more uplifting moments as well, but still with plenty of aggression. This made its way all the way up to perfection. Then we have Horn with Daudsvjok. Album 10 from this German band formed in 2002. Black metal woven with a lot of folky pagan swing to it. Love the slightly more upbeat bounce of Broth. Maybe a touch of Enslaved in there too, but a little crusty at times as well. Consistently engaging, if fairly familiar. I put it at fantastic. Then we have Vorga with Beyond the Palest Star. The sophomore record from this German band, pulling in cosmic and science fiction elements in addition to the usual flair, very much an emphasis on atmosphere, but it can get a bit repetitive. I prefer moments like the unique synth work on Magical Thinking that stand out from the pack. I put this one at killer. Then we have Thanatotherion with Alienation Manifesto. Now, time for some fast, ferocious, and technically oriented black metal from members of Ulthar, Vastum, and Black Fucking Cancer. Between the vicious snarls and chaotic drumming, I definitely recommend this to fans of Abzu, but I'm also getting notes of everything from Early Enslaved to Goreguts and Artificial Brain. Absolutely love this album. It was one of my favorite albums of the month that it came out. It is going to perfection. Next up is Les Chants du Hussard with Livre Quart. I've been a fan of this French project that, rather than focusing on guitar tremolos and blast beats, forgoes all of that in favor of a pure orchestral experience that still conjures the same dark atmosphere. What most would convey through distortion, Hussard does through brass, strings, woodwind instruments, and operatic performances, only providing snarling vocals when absolutely necessary for truly grand effect. I put this one at amazing. Next up is Kavayan with The Formless Fires. this Swedish project's third album and their first through Metal Blade Records, and overall I enjoyed it, but at the same time it feels like yet another example of mellow black worship of dissection. The clear highlight for me was De Dodes Sang. If every song was as strong as that one, I'd be singing more praises, but as it stands, I found much of the rest of it to be just a solid execution of the same old ideas. Still landed at a place at killer. Then we have Cold Cell with Age of Unreason. The fifth album from this Swiss band, whose drifty sound I'd compare somewhat to Blutdau's Nord or Deathspell Omega, but I'd argue that they have an even more meandering post-metal approach, kind of a black metal version of Ulcerate without the more technical elements. Definitely eerie, atmospheric stuff that has some very strong moments, but also makes me feel impatient at times. I personally just find myself wishing I was listening to Blutdau's Nord instead, but they do what they do very well. This one is also going to killer. Then we have Aetheria Conscientia with The Blossoming. Another highly requested third album from the audience, this one out of France and dipping once more into the progressive end of the spectrum. Not only do we get excellently dark and imposing traditional elements, we also get some killer saxophone and clean female backing vocals for added mystique. I think it could maybe use just a little bit more focus to its compositions, but overall this is another unique experience when it comes to the state of black metal in 2024. It earned a spot at fantastic. Next up is Sabbat with Sabbati Cult. Look at this Japanese band's Metal Archives page and you'll be scrolling for a while to get through all of their releases starting back in the mid-80s. This is their 10th full-length album and the first in 13 years, but in spite of all that, they still maintain that unmistakable speed metal-influenced Venom sound. Lots of crusty beats, chugging guitars, and wailing solos, and even a production job that could have fooled me in regards to when it was recorded. Fun if, again, another one that's a bit familiar. Put this one at great tier. Then we have Wormwitch with Self-Titled. The fourth full-length from this British-Columbian blackened metal band formed out of the husk of several other punk and metal bands, and you can hear equal portions of all of those elements coming through in this bubbling cauldron of menace. I'm particularly fond of the DB-driven ragers like Bright and Poisonous, complete with Tom G. Warrior-esque, maybe some Watain comparisons on this one as well. It is going to killer. Then we have Seth with La France des Maudits. Album 7 from this French black metal band formed back in 1995. More moody stuff emphasizing melancholic atmosphere at a moderate pace. I do really love the use of organ and backing chorals on tracks like Et que vive le diable. Excuse my pronunciation, it is atrocious. Another album I'd say I respect more than I enjoy, but I can't deny the powerful performances and excellent production. This one also landed a spot at killer. And then we are going to wrap things on this list with Oculus with House of the Black Geminis. Another atmospheric opus from Colorado black metal musician Nas Alchemith, also of Eretos, Bestia Arcana, and Nightbringer. The debut from this project remains among my favorite in the genre, but compositions only seem to get bigger with this third effort, vicious, snarling vocals, and a blizzard of distortion signal the coming of demons from the other side. This is how you make 10+ minute songs that actually feel worthy of their length, and from the ensorceling production to the always spooky guitar leads, it is another masterpiece that earned a spot at perfection. And if you want to see the whole list so far, here's where we've left off as of today. Alright, moving into the final 25, we have Krallis with Inorganic Rites. This New York band has become one of the most prolific in the scene, with this being the 14th full length of theirs since their debut in 2008. And with that level of output, this could easily turn into a quantity over quality issue, but once again, not only does their take on black metal continue to be good, they still manage to surprise me. This feels like the perfect fusion of complex songwriting, technical performances, and stunning atmosphere, enough so that I'm gonna put it up at perfection. Then we have Uprising with 3. Led by W of Waldgeflüster, and with drumming from Austin Lunn of Panopticon, this German project continues to deliver on melancholic melodies, somewhere between Inquisition and Tribulation, with maybe just a touch of Bathory's later material. And what follows is an incredibly impassioned and mournful dirge for humanity driven by social and political themes, and in a way that doesn't feel totally ham-fisted. I haven't really sat down with the lyrics. I heard some people complaining about them, but I don't know, it didn't bother me, and I am somebody where that sometimes does bother me, so I put it at great tier. Next up is Spectral Wound with Songs of Blood and Mire. A pretty anticipated release from the black metal fans in my audience based on some of the comments leading up to this album. It's their fourth outing with another pure and unfiltered blast of the genre from the Montreal band, and while I've largely tired of the endless waves of dissection-inspired bands doing that sound, this well earns a pass, I would say. Up there with Black Braid last year, those soaring melodies and infectious beats will absolutely get under your skin. It went to fantastic. Next up is True Black Dawn with Of Thick Circling Shadows. I always love being reminded of the story behind this Finnish black metal band's name, formed in 1992 as simply Black Dawn. When threatened with legal action by a band of the same name, they came back making a clear statement as to which band was superior, and that fuck you attitude definitely comes through in the music. Their third full length, once more delivering on traditions of other bands from the early era like Marduk and Satyricon, with reverb-soaked guitars and raspy snarls seeming to call from oblivion. I put this one at good tier. Not the best thing out there, but enjoyable. And we have Inaphelion with Reaper Dawn. The second album from the Swedish and Netherlands project, formed by necrophobic guitarist and lyricist Sebastian Romstedt. Good mix here of straight blasters and more headbob-inducing mid-pace material, definitely feeling some comparisons to the likes of Watain and at times even Tribulation. Another case of songs going a bit longer than they need to, but a strong listen nonetheless. It earned a spot at great tier. Then we have Winter Felleth with The Imperious Horizon. At first, this may seem like your typical, somewhat repetitious atmospheric release, but patience will be rewarded for those willing to make the investment, as the further you get in, the more this album just opens up stylistically, incorporating chilling synths and some truly haunting clean vocals as well. I still think it could be trimmed down a bit in terms of its massive runtime, but overall I'm thankful for soaking in the experience, and this one ended up at fantastic. Then we have God Dethroned with the Judas Paradox. People still call these guys a death metal band, but there really isn't an ounce of that left on this record. It is just so far removed from their earlier roots that at this point it just feels like a very mopey, generic black metal record with zero personality. I was so bored with this thing, which is all the more unfortunate since I was looking forward to it. Hailing Death and Broken Bloodlines are okay, some neat harmonized guitar leads, but overall this honestly had me begging it to be over with just how boilerplate it feels. I tried re-listening to it a few times and I just couldn't. Like, it's just that meh. So put it at okay, but if I had like a bad tier, I would put it down there. Then we have Bewitcher with Spell Shock. Fun mix of black and speed metal from this Portugal crew, which sounds like something I should love, but something about their particular heavy metal influenced approach just doesn't do a ton for me personally. Very retro, good execution. I get why people dig it, but I think I respect it more than I enjoy it. So I put it at good tier. We also have Servant with Death Devil Magic. The third album from this German band, such a wonderful mix of epic melodies with the intensity of the vocals, and unlike a lot of groups in this style, they understand that less is more with these much more focused track lengths. I particularly enjoy the dark groove of Devil, the pummeling blast beats and fire guitars of Fury, and the foot tap-inducing Litany. This one also landed at fantastic. Then we have Spite with the Third Temple. The second album from this US black metal band, and another I would say is mostly a bit overly familiar. There are some glimmers here and there of personality and memorability, even some where the jangly guitar work reminds me a bit of Toke, as with Unblessed, but mostly I find the songwriting as a whole to be meandering and needlessly long-winded. Winded. So I'm going to put this one at good tier. Then we have Esaktrulahum with Döth-Dernyàlh, and I don't know. And I know the black metal nerds out there get mad when I mispronounce things, so I'm not even gonna try. Not even gonna try anymore. There's no pleasing those people. I'm gonna say Döth-Dernyàlh. Even though I tend to complain about this project putting out too much material, often 2 albums a year and up to 2 hours apiece, I am actually really enjoying this latest record. The addition of the 12-string guitar alongside these spooky electronic leads really gives a similar fog-shrouded forest atmosphere as early Opeth. The one major downside is that I wish the vocals didn't sound like Gollum shrieking about a thorn in his foot. They're definitely an acquired taste, but you kind of get used to it. I ended up putting this at amazing. Then we have Labyrinthus Stellarum with Vortex of the Worlds. I was recommended this Ukrainian group in the comments and decided to check them out. Fantastic stuff that really gives me the more unique touch I was looking for when it comes to atmospheric black metal. They have a very different approach to the synth elements, which kind of infuses this Eastern sounding influence to their icy space theme. Reminds me a little bit of Cult of Fire and Death Karma in terms of the overall vibe. Very impressive for a second album, especially. I'm going to put this one at fantastic. We also have Evangelist with Perdition Ecstasis Meta. Very much another well-constructed black vortex of despair. It's an excellent union of black death and industrial elements, joining more aggressive, even Godflesh-esque drums and guitar alongside spooky synths, and even a few piano sections that reminded me of Nine Inch Nails' Ghosts, of all things. I put this one at killer. Another fan favorite here, we have Kanonenfieber with Die Catastrophe. The second album from this German blackened death metal band, once more expressing the horrors of war through songs based on actual documents from both victims and survivors of World War I. I saw quite a few people bemoaning the lack of a mention for this on my monthly release list, and while I do think that led to a little overhype on my part, it is certainly a strong outing for the genre this year. A lot of this feels like pretty typical, albeit very effectively executed melodic black metal, but there are some points like Sturmtrupp, Lviv zu Lemberg, and Der Malwurf that help the album ultimately stand out from the shadow of its peers. And again, I'm not sorry for mispronouncing any of that anymore. I don't care. Then we have Horna with Nix Himeneja Yula. The 30th, I'm getting slap happy here. The 30th anniversary for this Finnish black metal band formed back in 1994. I've enjoyed a few of their albums. They really know how to harness some pretty earworm hooks into their generally kind of repetitious, melancholic sound. Unfortunately here, I'm not really sure that those do enough to keep me interested through those like 7, 8, and almost 9-minute songs that mostly trudge through the same beat and riffs over and over and over again pretty much the entire time. Hymni 5 is a standout, though. Yeah, kind of middle here, lower middle. I'm going to put it at great tier. 1349, The Wolf and the King. The 8th album from this Oslo band, formed in 1997, and they remain dedicated to sticking to the grim sounds of the early days. The grumbly guitar tone brings notes of both 90s Satyricon, Immortal, and Inquisition, and the riffs, in spite of their nihilistic warlike energy, can be quite infectious alongside the raw pounding of the drums. Really enjoyed this one. It went to Fintheistic. Then we have Barathrum with Uberkill. Formed in 1991, these guys are supposedly among the first of Finland's black metal bands. This now their 10th album. Unfortunately, I'm not really a fan of this one. I find the vocals to be pretty annoying and the HM2 buzzsaw guitar is pretty generic. Still far from terrible, just kind of grating. It landed at okay. Alright, one I will show some respect in getting the pronunciation right for because I love them so much. We have Thy Catafalque with
A gyönyörű álmok ezután jönnek.
Album 12 from this ever-innovating Hungarian black metal band, and from the first explosion of the clean vocals and folky atmosphere of the opener, I was once more completely engrossed, as I have been with their past material. You've got chill jazz transitioning into aggressive blackened death metal, sorrowful strings giving way to more enslaved-esque prog, 80s-style synths, mandolin, breathtaking traditional ululated singing, and of course, the occasional saxophone solo. Of course, these guys landed a spot at perfection and on my list of my favorite metal albums of the year, regardless of genre. On the flip side, we have Gaia with Coma. Now, I feel like everyone has gone gaga for this atmospheric black metal crew out of Spain besides me. I enjoyed their early material enough, but it feels like with each subsequent release, I have felt less and less interested and invested, and more that my initial inclination that this is pretty boilerplate stuff for the genre was pretty accurate. I think they just put kind of a fresh coat of paint and some really strong imagery into like the music videos. Don't get me wrong, they do what they do well, from the performances to the production, and there are some new twists on this one, but I just keep finding myself asking why I should care more about this over the droves of similar and frankly better bands out there in this style. So they didn't land at the bottom, but just me personally, I'm not a huge fan. Putting in that good tier. I do love that album art though.
What do you think, Larry? What do you mean,
Then we have Oranzi Pazuzu with Muntautuj. Album number 6 from this Finnish psychedelic black metal band, and one I found myself describing as Trent Reznor soundtrack meets Blut aus Nord. Industrial black metal and even some light dubstep, the classic understated kind, not the Skrillex kind. Major vibes, sometimes chill and groovy, others eerie or outright terrifying. Fantastic for this one as well. Before I get to my final 5, I want to say feel free to add other albums in the comments you would recommend from this year, as admittedly, I got so tired of listening to so many that they all just started to run together, especially the like lower tier stuff. So I'm sure there's plenty more I could have included. As it is, I already cut like 5 to 10 more albums before I started the recording, because I just can't. I can't. I'm definitely not doing, unless like this blows up in views, I am not doing this again next year, because it is just torturous to listen to some of the more generic black metal albums out there. Like the cream of the crop stuff is fantastic, don't get me wrong, I love the genre when it's firing on all cylinders, but yeah, just being dedicated to all the stuff down here, it was killing my soul. So moving on, we have Chaos Invocation with Wherever We Roam. The 5th album from this full speed ahead from this German band, and their sound is once more far from original, but they absolutely nail the best version of all of the tropes with a malevolence and aggression that once more reminds me a bit of Watain. There are also some glimmers of hope here and there too, as on Bridges of Flame, to keep things interesting and provide that all-important counterpoint that makes the darker moments all the darker for it. That landed at a spot at amazing. We also have Shamash with the Maldor Chants, Old Ocean. Big fan of this Swiss avant-garde black metal band's work. They continue to take the genre in a more explorative and introspective direction with this 5th LP. The more I listen to, the more I realize these guys are kind of the reason why I find bands like Gaia to just feel so one-dimensional in comparison. They just do so much more with their compositions while crafting a similar energy. Songs ebb and flow into interesting directions, making longer tracks feel far more engaging by comparison. I'd actually compare some of their songwriting and guitar work on this album more to Tool, just translated into a darker direction. It's not my favorite of their albums. I strongly, though, recommend checking out a lot of their material, but I think I'm going to put this one at amazing. We also have The Spirit with Songs Against Humanity.
As we lost our way towards utopia.
The 4th album from this German melodic black metal band I've been enjoying since their 2017 debut. Another group of hundreds with clear roots in dissection, but something about just the way that they do it, it just sort of hits for me most of the time. Super tight packaging of captivating riffs, malevolent vocals, and great use of dynamics. I'm gonna put this one at killer. We have Black Curse with Burning and Celestial Poison. Probably the most commented black metal album that did not make my best of October list, and the second from this Denver black and death metal band. Another case where I'm a little bit miffed by all the hype. Like, it's good, but I'm failing to see what's particularly special about it. Still, I give them credit for mostly carrying these pretty lengthy songs, especially for a band that sounds straight out of the early Norwegian sound in its raw chaos. I'm gonna put this one... You know what? I'm going to switch this up a little bit. I'm going to put, I think the Spirit, actually, this one, I'm going to put a Great, and I'm going to put Black Curse at Amazing. Or Killer, rather. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. But that brings us, thankfully, to the final album on this list, and one that I am excited to talk about, Veilburner, with the duality of decapitation and wisdom. Such a highly underrated Pennsylvania black metal band celebrating its 7th album and going all in with this theologically significant number with 7 songs, each running exactly 7 minutes. That may sound like a gimmick on the surface, but they've managed to pull off another truly exemplary piece of work here with all of the usual bizarre psychedelic flourishes, pretty demented sounding stuff, and yet it has a way of burrowing under the skin to tickle the brain in just the right way, which is why it also landed a spot at perfection. And now I'm going to do my best to get the whole board on screen here. Oh, that actually... There you go. That is the full board. 75 black metal albums from 2024. Y'all check out this playlist for more black metal rankings, or this one for more of my rankings by genre for 2024. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches, but not talking about black metal anytime soon.
I'm talking about hardcore death metal, sometimes referred to as black metal.